Hi, my name is Graciana Webby, and I want to start this presentation with what the regular eye and vision is like. First off, our eye is a layered structure. We have the outer layer, which includes the cornea and sclera. We have the middle layer, which includes the iris, ciliary body, and choroid. And lastly, the inner layer, which is including the retina. How vision is established is that the cornea and lens focus on the incoming light from the external environment, which then goes onto the retina to help form the clear image. The iris of the eye adjusts the pupil size to control how much light enters the eye. The retina, which contains rods and cones to convert the light into electrical signals, and that gets sent through the optic nerve, which this leads to the overall idea of how vision is the interpretation for the brain to allow us to see images, colors, movement, and depth.
My name is Mateo Pasquale, and our super sense would be adaptive zoom plus night vision. Adaptive zoom would work by changing the lens to become much thicker and more flexible. This would be followed by strengthening the ciliary muscles so that they are able to change and manipulate the thicker and more flexible lens. These changes would allow for a person to have an increased focus range, meaning they could see things farther, almost like a magnifying glass. For night vision, there would need to be changes made to the photoreceptors in the retina. An increase in rod cells would be a necessary change as they are responsible for a person's low light vision. Along with this, an increase in rotospin would be necessary as it would give rod cells an improved sensitivity in low light settings. Your iris would also need to be able to dilate much wider, which would allow for more light to enter the eye during the night. Both of these modifications would need to be coupled with an enhanced processing of the visual cortex to give you both a sharper distance imaging and amplified low light signals coming into the brain.
Hi, my name is Peyton, and I'm going to be talking about the integration of the autonomic and somatic nervous system in the new sense that we came up with, which is the enhanced zoom and night vision. So the application of this new sense would require collaboration from both the autonomic and somatic nervous systems. The autonomic system is responsible for regulating light entry and focus by controlling the iris and ciliary muscles to allow for very rapid contraction in bright conditions. And this is to protect the newly made rod dense retina and for altering the lens to produce a clear image. The autonomic system also helps to regulate blood flow and neural signals to prevent overstimulation of the entire system and maintain a homeostatic environment. At the same time, the somatic system would work to provide voluntary movements of the eye to allow for more precise tracking and focusing, especially focusing as the depth of the field of view increased dramatically with the increased zoom. And so specifically cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6, which are the oculomotor, trochlear, and the abducens nerve, work together to mediate these focusing processes. And in this scenario, these two systems work together congruently to form this negative feedback loop to maintain that homeostatic environment. The negative feedback loop characterized in this homeostatic process begins by the presence of the increased light in the newly rod-rich retina, and the response to this stimulus is carried out by the autonomic pathways, as we previously talked about. And this is done by performing actions such as constricting the pupil, adjusting the volume of output from the lacrimal gland, and regulating blood flow. So the pupil constriction accounts for the increased light allowance through the lens. The lacrimal gland just adjusts its production to provide better lubrication to maintain a smooth surface over the lens, as well as maintaining the shape. The cranial nerves contribute to this negative feedback loop by linking together the sensory input, which comes from the stimulus, which is the increased light exposure, and the extra sensitive rods, and transmits it into motor output, which is characterized by the adjustment in pupil size, lens shape, and position of the eye. As we discussed previously, cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 which we talked about, which ones those are responsible for the voluntary eye movement that was described above, which we also described in the previous slide. The optic nerve, otherwise known as cranial nerve number 2 or cranial nerve 2, is what detects the change in the light intensity and then transmits that information to send to the brain, which is what then activates the motor cranial nerves to carry out their responsibilities.
My name is Riley Dupre, and today I will be talking about the anatomical structure of our enhanced SuperSense eye. To enhance our eye, we changed the lens, pupil, ciliary muscle, and the retina. In the normal human eye, the lens has a very limited zoom and is flexible, so in our SuperSense eye, we made it highly flexible, which will increase how much it will zoom in. The normal eye's pupil typically take a normal light intake, so on our SuperSense, we made it so that the pupil will dilate wider, therefore more light will enter in, especially at night. The ciliary muscles in the eye normally have standard strength, so we increase the ciliary muscle strength to make it stronger and faster, which makes it easier to focus on objects faster and at farther distances. The retina has normal rods, which will help with night vision, but us increasing the rods will ensure our SuperSense eye will be able to see much more during night time because of an increased rhodopsin. After looking at our SuperSense, we need to look into what is being traded off with the SuperSense. Firstly, there is a presence of more rods in the retina, which enhances our night vision. However, this comes at the cost of diminished color vision. Rods are incredibly sensitive to low light and are not designed for detecting color, which is where cones come into play. Another trade-off is related to zoom. While with a greater zoom comes with detailed images, that can result in a narrow field of vision. This means that while we can see distant objects clearly, our peripheral awareness is reduced. Lastly, we have larger pupils and an extra reflective layer known as the tapetum lucidum in some animals, which help increase image sharpness. These adaptations work to offset the challenges posed by the enhancements for night vision and zoom.